You're too weak to fight this, Kelsey. Just accept the demotion and move on. Brandon's voice filled the conference room, loud enough for everyone to hear. My fingers tightened around my pen. That was the only sign his words had hit their target. He leaned back in his chair with his arms crossed, smirking. The 12 people around the table looked uncomfortable, but nobody spoke up. Nobody ever did when Brandon attacked someone. I looked at him calmly, keeping my face blank even though anger burned in my chest. I see, I said quietly. Just 2 words. His smirk grew wider. He thought my silence meant I was giving up. He had no idea silence meant I was planning. Around the table, Tyler wouldn't meet my eyes. Marissa stared at her laptop. Jordan pretended to write notes. They had all heard Brandon humiliate me during what should have been a normal project meeting. They would remember this moment, but not the way Brandon expected. Meeting done, Brandon announced, standing quickly. Kelsey, stay. We need to talk about your transition. The room emptied fast. Everyone grabbed their things and left quickly. Marissa touched my shoulder as she walked past, maybe trying to say sorry without words. I didn't look at her. I kept my eyes on Brandon, who was now checking his phone, making me wait on purpose. He loved these little power games. When the door finally closed, he looked up. This isn't personal. You're just not manager material. Derek is getting the promotion instead. Derek, who joined our company 8 months ago. Derek, who I had trained myself. Derek, whose ideas in meetings were usually just my ideas said with more confidence. I understand, I said calmly. Brandon looked surprised. He had expected me to cry or get angry so he could tell everyone later that I was too emotional. Gave him nothing. You'll work under Derek now. Same pay technically but different job. It's actually better for you. Less stress. He used those smooth corporate words that made a demotion sound like a favor. I nodded slowly. When does this start? 2 weeks. We announce it Monday. He smiled, pleased that I wasn't fighting back. I'm glad you're being smart about this, Kelsey. My name is Kelsey Morrison. 30 minutes ago, I watched my career fall apart in front of witnesses. I was 34 years old and had spent 6 years at Hillcrest Analytics, building systems, managing teams, and quietly fixing everyone else's mistakes. I had a mortgage, student loans, and a work record that should have protected me. But I wasn't protected. I was disposable, apparently. Brandon Hutchins had been promoted to regional director 8 months ago, and he had decided I was an easy target for whatever game he was playing. The demotion wasn't about my work performance. It was about his insecurity and his need to prove he had power. He assumed I wouldn't fight back. He was completely wrong. I gathered my things from the conference room slowly. My hands were steady. My breathing was controlled. Inside, cold anger burned with sharp focus. But I had learned something important during my years in the corporate world. Emotion only works as a weapon when you use it at the right time. Anger shown too early is wasted. Brandon had just made the biggest mistake of his career. He just didn't know it yet. I walked back to my desk and opened my laptop, looking calm on the outside while my mind raced on the inside. My coworkers glanced at me with pity and relief. Relief it wasn't them, pity that it was me. I ignored them and opened a folder I had created 3 months ago. Hidden deep in my personal files and backed up in 3 places. The folder was called Insurance. Inside were documents, emails, recorded meetings, and a timeline of every questionable thing Brandon had done since becoming regional director. I hadn't started collecting evidence because I was paranoid. I had started because I paid attention. And what I noticed was a pattern of stealing credit, breaking rules, and sabotaging anyone he saw as competition. Small things caught my attention first. My project ideas showing up in his presentations without my name, budgets I had balanced getting adjusted, and then failing so I got blamed. Then bigger patterns emerged. Good people getting passed over for promotions while his friends moved up, expense reports with suspicious charges, contracts going to his old colleague's company even though better options existed. I had written it all down. Not because I was mean but because I knew how to survive. Corporate life teaches you fast. Trust nobody, document everything. That evening, I sat in my home office, the one I had painted blue last spring when I thought I was building a real future at Hillcrest. My cat, Pepper, slept on the desk beside my laptop, purring softly. The house was quiet except for typing sounds as I organized my evidence into a clear story. 3 months of watching had given me 97 separate incidents worth recording. Some were small, taking credit for others' work, rude comments in meetings. Others were big, breaking company rules about hiring, conflicts of interest when choosing vendors, and expense reports that looked more and more like fraud. But I needed more than just documents. I needed a plan. Brandon had power, connections, and protection from being recently promoted. If I confronted him directly, I would look bitter and emotional, exactly what he wanted people to think. I needed to be smarter. I needed to let him destroy himself while I just provided the opportunity. My phone buzzed. A text from Marissa. "Are you okay? What Brandon did was horrible." I typed back. "I'm fine. Just thinking." She sent back. "If you need anything." I appreciated it, even though I knew she wouldn't actually risk her job to help me. The next morning I arrived at work early like always. Brandon's car wasn't in the parking lot yet. But I needed time to set things in motion without him watching. I went straight to my desk and started working through my normal tasks, but I also did something else. I sent a carefully worded email to accounting. "Hi Patricia, I noticed some discrepancies in the Q3 vendor payments. Could you send me the detailed breakdown for the Hartman contract? I'm doing an efficiency review and want to make sure our records match. Thanks, Kelsey." Simple. Professional. Innocent. Patricia wouldn't think twice about it. But that contract was one of Brandon's suspicious ones. The one that went to his former colleague's company despite our company finding better bids. I needed the numbers to prove what I suspected. While I waited for her response, I opened my calendar and marked important dates. Monday, when Brandon would announce my demotion. 2 weeks from now, when it would officially take effect. And 30 days from now, when the quarterly executive review happened. That review was my target. That's when I would present everything to the people who could actually do something about Brandon. I just needed to stay calm and patient until then. Brandon arrived an hour later, walking past my desk without acknowledging me. He went straight into his office and closed the door. Through the glass walls, I watched him on his phone, laughing about something. He looked relaxed and confident. Why wouldn't he be? From his perspective, he had just eliminated a threat and put someone weaker in my place. Derek walked in shortly after, carrying an expensive coffee from the shop downtown. He saw me and hesitated, then came over. "Hey, Kelsey. I heard about the changes. I just want you to know I didn't ask for this." I looked at him steadily. "Didn't you?" His face reddened. "I mean, Brandon approached me about the promotion. I didn't know you were being. I didn't know about your situation." He was lying. Course he knew. But I didn't argue. Instead I smiled slightly. "Congratulations on your promotion, Derek. I'm sure you'll do great." He looked relieved and guilty at the same time. "Thanks. And I hope there's no hard feelings. We'll still be working together." "Of course," I said pleasantly. "I'm looking forward to supporting your success." Derek nodded and walked away quickly. He had no idea that every conversation we'd had over the past months was documented. Patricia from accounting responded to my email before lunch. She sent a spreadsheet with all the details I had asked for, along with a note. "Here's that breakdown. Let me know if you need anything else." I downloaded it immediately and started analyzing the numbers. My suspicions were correct. The Hartman contract had been awarded at a price 15% higher than the next closest bid. The justification in the approval notes cited superior service history, but Hartman was a new vendor with no previous relationship to our company. Meanwhile, the rejected bid came from Bradley Solutions, a vendor we had used successfully for 3 years. I cross-referenced the dates. Brandon had approved the Hartman contract 2 weeks after attending an industry conference in Miami. I pulled up the conference attendance list from the company's shared drive, something I had access to because I had organized our team's registration. There it was. Marcus Hartman had been a featured speaker at that conference. I opened LinkedIn and searched for Marcus Hartman. His profile showed he had worked with Brandon at their previous company 5 years ago. They were connected on the platform and had several mutual connections. This wasn't just a questionable business decision. This was likely a personal favor that cost our company thousands of dollars. Over the next week, I continued my normal work while quietly building my case. I was careful not to change my routine or behavior in any way that would make Brandon suspicious. I arrived at the same time, left at the same time, attended the same meetings, and maintained my usual pleasant but professional demeanor. On Friday, Brandon sent out the official announcement about the management restructuring. The email was filled with corporate language about optimizing team dynamics and leveraging individual strengths. My demotion was framed as a lateral move to better utilize Kelsey's technical expertise. Derek's promotion was praised as recognizing emerging leadership talent. The responses came quickly. Some people sent me private messages expressing sympathy. Others, the ones close to Brandon, sent congratulations to Derek on the company-wide thread. I responded to none of them. I simply archived the email in my insurance folder. That afternoon, Brandon called a team meeting to celebrate the transition. He brought donuts and coffee, playing the role of generous leader. When he toasted Derek's promotion, I raised my coffee cup with everyone else. When he thanked me for being a team player during this transition, I smiled and nodded. My face revealed nothing. The following Monday, my new reality began. I reported to Derek, who was clearly uncomfortable with the arrangement. He gave me assignments that were below my skill level. Updating spreadsheets, scheduling meetings, preparing reports that I used to write but now just had to format. It was humiliating work designed to make me quit. I did every task perfectly. I never complained, never showed frustration, never gave them any reason to claim I wasn't performing. Because I understood something they didn't. Employment lawyers pay attention to sudden changes in job duties, especially when they follow questionable demotions. Every menial task Derek assigned me was more evidence. Meanwhile, I continued my investigation. I had discovered that Brandon had implemented a new policy requiring all major decisions to be approved through him personally, bypassing the usual committee review process. This gave him control over vendor selections, budget allocations, and hiring decisions. It also meant all his questionable choices had his signature on them. I requested copies of approval documents from the past 6 months, claiming I was creating an updated process manual for Derek. Nobody questioned it. Why would they? I was just the demoted employee doing boring administrative work. I wasn't a threat. Except I was gathering everything I needed to end Brandon's career. 2 weeks into my new role, something unexpected happened. Tyler approached me during lunch in the break room. He looked around nervously before speaking quietly. "Kelsey, can I talk to you? Privately." We went outside to the parking lot. Tyler lit a cigarette with shaking hands. "I need to tell you something. About Brandon." He paused, struggling with the words. "He's doing to Marissa what he did to you. She doesn't know yet, but I overheard him talking to HR. He's planning to move her to a different department, report to someone junior. He's calling it a better fit for her skills." My stomach tightened. "When?" "Next month. After the quarterly review." Tyler took a long drag. "I feel sick about what happened to you, Kelsey. We all just sat there. And now he's doing it again and I can't just watch it happen again." I looked at Tyler carefully. He seemed genuine, but I had learned not to trust easily. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you're the only one who stood up to him, even if it was just by not falling apart. And because..." He hesitated. "Because he told me if I stay loyal, I'm next in line for promotion. He's buying people off and pushing others out. Tyler's information changed everything. Brandon wasn't just targeting me. He was systematically removing anyone he saw as a threat and replacing them with people who owed him their positions. It was a power play, building his own empire within the company. "I need you to do something," I said to Tyler. "Can you document what you heard? Dates, times, exact words if possible." He nodded quickly. "Already did. I've been keeping notes since the conference room thing with you. I don't know what you're planning, but if you're building a case, I want to help." "Why?" Asked directly. "What's in it for you?" Tyler looked at me with something like shame. "Nothing. I just want to be able to look at myself in the mirror." I stayed quiet when I should have spoken up. That's on me. But maybe I can help fix what I helped break by staying silent. I made a decision. Send me everything you have. Use your personal email to mine. Don't send it from your work computer. He agreed and went back inside. I stayed in the parking lot, my mind racing. An inside source changed the game completely. Tyler could confirm things I had only suspected. He could provide testimony if needed. But I had to be careful. This could also be a trap. Brandon testing my loyalty through Tyler. That evening, Tyler's email arrived. 3 pages of detailed notes with dates, times, and direct quotes from conversations he had witnessed or overheard. I read through them carefully, cross-referencing with my own documentation. Everything matched. Either Tyler was genuine or Brandon had orchestrated an incredibly elaborate trap. My instincts said Tyler was real. His notes included several revelations I hadn't known about. Brandon had been pressuring HR to reclassify certain positions to justify lower salaries. He had blocked 3 internal promotion candidates in favor of external hires who happened to be his former colleagues. And he had been building a case against Marissa for months, documenting minor mistakes and interpreting normal work decisions as poor judgment. The pattern was clear. Brandon was creating a loyal inner circle while systematically removing or diminishing anyone who might challenge him or expose his schemes. It was corporate manipulation at its finest. And it would have worked if he had been smarter about covering his tracks. But arrogance makes people sloppy. Brandon assumed nobody would dare challenge him. He assumed his targets would either quit quietly or be too intimidated to fight back. He never imagined someone might be documenting everything, building a case, and waiting for the perfect moment. His biggest mistake was underestimating me. The quarterly executive review was 3 weeks away. I needed to be ready to present my evidence in a way that was undeniable and professional. I couldn't just dump documents and hope executives would care. I needed to tell a story that showed clear harm to the company, not just personal grievances. I spent my evenings organizing everything into a presentation. First section, financial impact. Brandon's questionable vendor selections had cost the company an estimated $80,000 over 6 months. Second section, legal risk. His hiring practices and sudden demotions without proper documentation exposed the company to potential lawsuits. Third section, cultural damage. Employee morale had dropped significantly, and 3 top performers had quit in the past 4 months. I had numbers, documents, emails, and now Tyler's testimony. But I needed one more thing, a smoking gun. Something so clear that executives couldn't ignore it or explain it away. That smoking gun arrived unexpectedly on Wednesday. I was organizing files when I found a misfiled email thread in a shared folder. It was between Brandon and Marcus Hartman, discussing the contract before it was officially awarded. In the email, Brandon wrote, "Don't worry about the bid process. Just for show. I'll make sure you get it." That was fraud. Clear, documented fraud. I immediately saved copies of that email thread in multiple locations. Then I did something risky. I called the company's ethics hotline anonymously and reported the Hartman contract as potentially fraudulent. I provided just enough information to trigger an investigation but not enough to reveal my identity. 2 days later, an internal audit team arrived unannounced. They met with Brandon for 3 hours behind closed doors. When he emerged, his face was red and his jaw was clenched. He went straight to his office and started making phone calls. The office was buzzing with speculation. Nobody knew what was happening, but everyone could tell something big was going down. I kept my head down and continued working on Derek's assignments, acting completely unaware. That afternoon, Brandon sent an urgent email requesting all documentation related to the Hartman contract. He copied Derek, me, and Patricia from accounting. It was a panic move. He was trying to control the narrative before the auditors found something problematic. I responded professionally. I'll pull together everything from my files. Then I sent the auditors an anonymous email from a burner account with copies of everything I had found, including the incriminating email thread. I wanted to make sure they had the complete picture. Brandon's world was starting to crack. He just didn't realize how badly yet. The next Monday, Marissa came to my desk looking upset. "Did you hear? The audit team is interviewing people about Brandon's vendor contracts. They asked me about the approval process." She lowered her voice. "Kelsey, something's not right. They asked really specific questions, like they already knew something was wrong." I kept my expression neutral. "What did you tell them?" "The truth. That Brandon handles most of the vendor stuff himself and doesn't include the team in decisions anymore." I paused. "Do you think he's in trouble?" "I think auditors ask questions when they find irregularities," I said carefully. "But it's probably nothing." Marissa nodded but still looked worried. After she left, I felt a small twinge of guilt for keeping her in the dark. But I couldn't risk word getting back to Brandon that I was involved. That afternoon, the auditors requested to speak with me. I went to the conference room, heart pounding but face calm. They asked me about my role in vendor selection and whether I had noticed anything unusual about recent contracts. I answered honestly but carefully. Yes, I had noticed some decisions seemed unusual. No, I wasn't involved in the final approval process anymore. Yes, I could provide documentation of the previous approval process for comparison. A week before the quarterly review, things escalated quickly. The audit team presented their preliminary findings to the executive committee. I didn't know the details yet, but the aftermath was visible. Brandon was called into a meeting with the CEO and CFO that lasted all afternoon. When he came out, he looked shaken. The next day, Derek called me into his office. He looked uncomfortable and confused. "Kelsey, I need to ask you something. Did you report anything about Brandon to the ethics hotline or the audit team?" I looked at him directly. "I provided information when the auditors asked me questions. That's what you're supposed to do during an audit." "But did you initiate anything?" he pressed. "Are you asking if I reported concerns about financial irregularities? Because if the company has an ethics hotline, using it appropriately is not only allowed but encouraged by company policy." I kept my voice level and professional. Derek backed off. "I'm just trying to understand what's happening. Brandon thinks someone is trying to sabotage him. The audit team is looking at vendor contracts and approval processes. That's not sabotage. That's due diligence." I stood up. "Is there anything else you need, Derek?" He shook his head, looking lost. In that moment, I almost felt sorry for him. He had tied himself to Brandon's sinking ship. The quarterly executive review was scheduled for Friday. I had prepared my presentation meticulously, but I still didn't know if I would get the chance to present it. Then, on Thursday afternoon, I received an email from Caroline Reed, the VP of Operations. "Kelsey, please join us for tomorrow's executive review. We'd like to hear your perspective on some operational matters." 9 a.m. Executive Conference Room. My hands trembled slightly as I read it. This was it. My opportunity. That evening I practiced my presentation one more time. I had 20 slides covering 6 months of questionable decisions, financial impact, and documented policy violations. Focused on facts, not emotions. Numbers, not personal grievances. Company impact, not my hurt feelings. I barely slept that night. I kept rehearsing what I would say, how I would handle questions, how I would stay calm if Brandon tried to discredit me. Everything depended on how I presented this information. If I seemed bitter or emotional, they could dismiss me. If I seemed professional and concerned about company welfare, they had to take me seriously. At 8:45 a.m., I walked into the executive building carrying my laptop. My hands were steady. My outfit was professional. My evidence was undeniable. It was time to end Brandon's reign. The executive conference room was intimidating. All dark wood and leather chairs. Caroline Reed was there, along with CEO Thomas Brennan, CFO Patricia Winters, and HR Director Keith Monroe. Brandon sat at the far end of the table, his expression carefully neutral. Derek was noticeably absent. "Thank you for joining us, Kelsey," Caroline began. "We're conducting a comprehensive review of operational efficiency and decision-making processes. We understand you have some insights to share." I connected my laptop to the screen and pulled up my presentation. Brandon's eyes narrowed when he saw the title, Operational and Financial Concerns, 6-Month Analysis. I began speaking, my voice clear and steady. Over the past 6 months, I've observed several patterns that have negatively impacted our company's financial performance and legal compliance. I clicked to the first slide showing the Hartman contract cost comparison. This vendor contract represents a 15% cost increase over our previous vendor, with no documented justification for the change. I walked them through each example systematically. The suspicious timing of contract awards, the bypassed approval processes, the conflicts of interest with vendors, and the policy violations in hiring and promotion decisions. I showed Brandon's emails, financial records, and timeline correlations. Brandon's face grew redder with each slide. "This is ridiculous," he finally interrupted. "This is clearly a vindictive." "Let her finish," Thomas Brennan cut him off sharply. I continued through my presentation, maintaining professional composure even as my heart raced. When I reached the slide about the email between Brandon and Marcus Hartman, the one discussing awarding the contract before the official bidding process, the room went completely silent. "This email was found in a shared folder," I explained. "It demonstrates premeditated bid rigging, which violates both company policy and potentially federal procurement laws, depending on the nature of the contracts involved." Patricia Winters, the CFO, leaned forward. "How long have you had this information, Kelsey?" "I discovered it 3 weeks ago while organizing files for a project. I reported it through the ethics hotline immediately, which triggered the recent audit." I looked at each executive. "I want to be clear. This presentation isn't about personal grievances, though I do appear in this data. It's about protecting our company from legal liability and financial loss." I clicked to my final slide, a summary showing estimated costs, legal risks, and recommendations. My recommendation is a complete review of all vendor contracts and hiring decisions from the past 6 months, implementation of mandatory approval committees for major expenditures, and ethics training for all management staff. I closed my laptop and sat down. The room was quiet except for the sound of Patricia typing rapidly on her tablet. Brandon stared at the table, his jaw clenched. Thomas Brennan spoke first. "Brandon, do you have a response to these allegations?" Brandon looked up, his face a mixture of anger and desperation. "This is clearly retaliation for a management decision. Kelsey was demoted because her performance didn't meet expectations. She's trying to. Her performance reviews for the past 5 years are all excellent," Keith Monroe interrupted, flipping through a folder. "In fact, you gave her an outstanding rating just 7 months ago, right before your promotion. What changed?" Brandon fumbled. "New standards. Different expectations at the management level. Then why did you promote Derek, who has fewer years of experience and lower performance ratings?" Keith pressed. Brandon had no good answer. Caroline Reed stepped in. "We've heard enough. Brandon, you're suspended pending a full investigation. Keith, coordinate with legal on next steps. Kelsey, thank you for bringing this to our attention. Your professionalism in handling this situation is noted and appreciated." Brandon stood up abruptly. "You're making a mistake. Everything I did was for this company's benefit, including giving a 15% higher contract to your former colleague," Patricia challenged. "Including the email where you promised to rig the bid?" Brandon's face went pale. He left without another word. The door closed behind him with a soft click that sounded like finality. The meeting continued for another hour without Brandon. The executives asked me detailed questions about the approval process changes, the cultural impact on the team, and my observations about other management practices. I answered everything honestly and thoroughly. Finally, Thomas Brennan addressed me directly. "Kelsey, I want to apologize on behalf of this organization. What happened to you should never have occurred. Your demotion was clearly retaliatory, and we're going to correct it immediately." Caroline added, "We'd like to offer you the regional director position that Brandon vacated. We need someone with integrity and attention to detail in that role. Someone who puts the company's interests first." I sat still for a moment, processing. The job I should have gotten 6 months ago was now being offered to me. But something inside me had shifted during this experience. "I appreciate that offer," I said slowly. "Can I have some time to think about it?" They looked surprised but agreed. I left the executive building and walked to my car. My phone buzzed with texts from Marissa and Tyler asking what happened. I didn't respond yet. I needed to think. I had won. Brandon was suspended and would almost certainly be fired. My demotion would be reversed. I could have the promotion I deserved. But did I still want it? Did I still want to work for a company that had allowed Brandon to operate unchecked for so long? I took the weekend to think. I drove to my parents' house upstate, something I hadn't done in months because I had been too consumed with work. My mom made dinner while I told her everything that had happened. She listened quietly, then said something that surprised me. "You proved yourself, honey. You proved you're stronger and smarter than any of them. But now you have to decide what you're proving it for." She set down her coffee. "Are you trying to prove you belong in a place that didn't value you? Or are you trying to prove you deserve better than that place?" Her words stayed with me all weekend. On Sunday evening I made my decision. I called Caroline Reed and scheduled a meeting for Monday morning. Monday came. I walked into Caroline's office with a folder containing my resignation letter and a counteroffer. "I appreciate the regional director position," I began. "But I'd like to propose something different." I handed her my proposal. A 6-month consulting contract to implement the changes I had recommended. New approval processes, ethics compliance systems, and management accountability structures. After that, I would leave Hillcrest to start my own consulting firm specializing in corporate governance and compliance. Caroline read through it carefully, then looked up with a slight smile. "You've thought this through." "I have. I proved I could win here. Now I want to prove I can build something better somewhere else." Caroline accepted my proposal immediately. Over the next 6 months, I worked as a consultant implementing systemic changes at Hillcrest. Brandon was terminated after the investigation confirmed fraud and policy violations. Derek was demoted back to his previous position. Marissa was promoted to lead the team I used to manage. The changes I implemented became a model that other companies in our industry started adopting. My phone rang constantly with requests for similar consulting work. By month 5, I had enough clients lined up to launch my own firm. Tyler became my first employee. His willingness to stand up when it mattered had proven his character, and I needed people with integrity. Together, we built Morrison Consulting Group, specializing in corporate ethics and operational efficiency. The irony wasn't lost on me. Brandon's attempt to diminish me had actually launched a more successful career than I would have had at Hillcrest. His arrogance had freed me to build something better. On my last day at Hillcrest, the team threw a small goodbye party. People I had worked with for years came to thank me, many admitting they wished they had spoken up sooner. I appreciated their honesty, but I had learned something important. You can't wait for others to fight your battles. I left that building for the last time with my head high and my future bright. Today, 3 years later, Morrison Consulting Group has 15 employees and serves clients across the country. We help companies build ethical cultures and prevent exactly the kind of abuse I experienced. The work is fulfilling in ways my old job never was, because I'm not just surviving corporate politics, I'm actively changing them. I still keep that insurance folder, though I've never needed it again. It reminds me that documentation, patience, and strategic thinking are more powerful than anger or impulsive reactions. It reminds me that strength isn't about fighting every battle loudly. It's about fighting the right battles effectively. Brandon tried to diminish me by calling me too weak to fight. He was wrong about that, but he accidentally revealed a truth. I was too smart to fight the way he expected. I didn't fight with emotion or confrontation. I fought with evidence, patience, and professionalism. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is stay calm while everyone underestimates you. Let them think you're weak while you're actually building the case that will end them. Let them think you've given up while you're actually preparing to win. Brandon wanted to make me speechless. Instead, I made the whole office speechless when they learned what quiet determination could accomplish. The best revenge wasn't destroying him. It was succeeding so completely that his attempt to stop me became the catalyst for something better. I wasn't too weak to fight. I was strong enough to fight smart. And that made all the difference.